Chapter 4 of History. So, when Chapter 3 ended, basically, if you were brave enough to go into the oceans filled with sea monsters where you could be boiled alive by the boiling seas in a ship you have little control over and using terrible maps, you would need money for a ship and a crew and supplies. And for 500 long years, the answer was no because there was no reason. So, when you would ask the kings and queens, the answer would be no. But those no's did become yeses, as you learned in the last video, when a purpose came. In order for the kings and queens to get the riches of the Indies, they would need to use the ocean to get there. And so, for the very first time, the people from Europe are going out into the oceans, and the age of exploration has begun. When the age of exploration first started, the goal was to find a way by water to get from Europe, where the star is, to the riches of the Indies. And so that pathway, that Silk Road by land, has been blocked off. So now we need to go by water. So the problem is back then, because we had never really explored much, we had no idea what the earth looked like, and they had no idea the Americas were even there. So when they're trying to get from Europe to the riches of the Indies, they're not using all of the knowledge we have today. So the very first power country to try to get to the riches of the Indies was Spain's fart. That would be Portugal. And Portugal, Prince Henry of Portugal, was given the task of being the first to find a way by water to get from Portugal to the Indies. And he believed that the best way to get there was to go around Africa. Now, when I look at this map, that makes perfect sense. But back then, they didn't know very much about what the earth looked like. And everything you see there in yellow was the unknown. No one in Europe had ever been that far south. And so they didn't know the size of Africa. They didn't know the shape of Africa. They didn't even know if you could get around Africa to get to the Indies. So it definitely was risky business. Portugal's going to send two explorers. The first explorer they're going to send is Bartholomew Diaz in 1487. His path, you can see, is in red on this map. And he hugged tightly to the coast, mapping it, the shape and the size as he went. Unfortunately, when he reached the southern tip of Africa, his crew was sick from the rough waters of hugging the coast. They were out of food and supplies, and so they were forced to go back to Portugal, never having made it to the Indies. No worries, 10 years later, Portugal's going to try again with Vasco da Gama. We already know the shape and the size of the western side of Africa, so he can go much further out from the coast, which is much calmer waters, but he does need to hug the eastern side of Africa to map it out, and he does successfully make it to the Indies. That makes Portugal not only the first to try to get to the Indies, but also the first to succeed. The problem is, no one knows Vasco da Gama is the first one to make it to the Indies. That's because in between these two explorers, that is when Christopher Columbus took his journey. And this is again a time period where they don't know the Americas are there. So in 1492, Columbus thinks the best way to get from Europe to the riches of the Indies is to sail west. So obviously that's not going to work, but he thinks he made it to the Indies and he goes back to Europe, tells everyone he made it to the Indies, and everyone believes he's the first European to make it to the Indies. He never made it to the Indies. He made it to the Americas, but he didn't even know he was in the Americas, yet he's given credit for discovering America. So many problems. But he does change history because he does go back to Europe and say, I did it, I made it to the Indies. And so other explorers are like, forget going around Africa, that takes too long. I'm going to do what Columbus did and sail west to get to the Indies. One of those explorers is Thinker Dude. Thinker Dude takes two different trips to try to get to the Indies. The first one you can see there in red, and that's when he starts thinking. He's like, Columbus says this is the Indies, but that was a really short trip. I feel like it should have taken longer. And then a couple years later, you can see his pathway in yellow a little bit further south. This time, Thinker Dude's thinking a little bit more, and he's like, Columbus says this is the Indies, but I read a book by Marco Polo once that described what the Indies should look like, and this doesn't look anything like it. And Thinker Dude's like, I'm pretty sure this is not the Indies. I think this is a whole new land we never knew was there. Thinker Dude's real name? Amerigo Vespucci. If you remember, he goes back to Europe. He convinces a German map maker named Martin Waldseemüller to put this new land no one knew was there on a map. And you can see it right here. This is the Americas. This is North and South America. Looks nothing like it because thinker dude Amerigo Vespucci knows there's or believes there's land there. He just doesn't know the shape and size. So that's the original America on a map. You'll notice the rest of the map looks pretty junky too, except for Africa. Africa looks pretty solid on the shape and the size. And if you remember, that's because Portugal has just mapped out Africa on their journeys trying to get to the riches. Now, Amerigo Vespucci, the one who figured out that the Americas was there, that is who America is named after. America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. So now that they figured out the Americas were there, it's like, forget about the Indies. Let's go claim as much of this land as we can. And so we then started to use this map. And this is a map of the Americas. You can see North and South America. The title of the map says European Control of the Americas in the 1500s. Amerigo Vespucci figured out the Americas are there right around the start of the 1500s. And then it became a race for these power countries to take as much of this land as possible. But if you look at our key, there's only enough spaces there for 4 of our power countries. That's because one of our power countries did not claim any land. We are going to use red to show the land that Spain claimed, blue for France, green to show the land that Portugal claimed, and yellow for England. That means Italy did not claim any land in the Americas, and they are done being talked about by us. We're going to start with Portugal real quick. Portugal did claim a huge chunk of South America, but that's all they claimed. That land today is called Brazil. And because Portugal claimed that land 500 years ago, they still speak Portuguese in Brazil today. Now, Spain went absolutely crazy claiming land. Spain claimed what is known as Central America. And then the Spanish explorer had the nerve to claim an entire ocean. He claimed the Pacific Ocean for Spain. Also, all of these islands in the Caribbean were also claimed by Spain. Juan Ponce de Leon, in search for the Fountain of Youth, claimed this land here. He called it La Florida, meaning filled with flowers, and claimed what is today Florida for Spain. Then it's like just take. We conquered 4 million Aztecs and claimed what is today Mexico for Spain. We conquered 9 million Incas and claim their land for Spain. And once we did that, we kind of spread ourselves out. And we're not done. In search of the 7 cities of gold, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado traveled throughout the southwestern part of what is today the United States, never found the 7 cities of gold, but claimed all of that land for Spain. You can see Spain definitely spent the most money on ocean exploration and claimed the most land. France went further north. France claimed this part of what is today Canada and then worked their way down into what is today the United States of America. And so you can see the land there that France claimed. Now, you'll notice there's no yellow on this map. And I can't put yellow on this map because if you look at the title, it says European control of the Americas in the 1500s. In the 1500s, Portugal was claiming land. And in the 1500s, Spain was claiming a ton of land. And in the 1500s, even France was claiming land. But England didn't claim any land in the 1500s. In order for me to put England on this map, I have to get rid of that in the 1500s. Now I can put England on the map. And there isn't a ton of land for England to claim. England is going to claim this chunk of land that I just colored in yellow. And it's going to take them a pretty long time to do that. You see, Spain is going to claim all that land in red in under 40 years. I mean, they just are willing to do anything to get it. England is going to work a little slower. They're going to be starting in the 1600s, and they're not going to claim it all at once. They're going to claim it chunk by chunk by chunk. In fact, they're going to claim a total of 13 chunks. But we're not going to call them chunks. We're going to call them 13 colonies. And so in yellow, you are looking at England's 13 colonies, which should sound familiar. We'll review that more, but that is the land that England will claim. And so if you take a look, I know it looks more like a cow than a country. When you look at the United States of America, Portugal never claimed any land that is our country today. So we are done talking about Portugal. But you can very clearly see the three power countries that are connected to the history of the United States of America. You can see some red in there for Spain, some blue in there for France, and of course, the most important power country connected to our history, the yellow for England. And so our next step will be to focus on how Spain and France and England use the land they claim in the Americas, which will lead to the United States of America becoming a country.